Okay, thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Michael Salmon. I'm with Verizon's Technology Standards Planning Organization. I'm happy to be here and thank you for making time to join us here on this webinar. In support of the API Days event, I have the pleasure of having with me today a number of leaders in the technology open network APIs field from different network operators and also industry association, GSMA. And we'll be talking briefly about the work that we've collectively been doing and as well as with other industry partners to expand and improve the developer experience with telecom open network APIs. And that includes, we'll be discussing the CAMARA initiative, the 5G Future Forum, and also work we're doing in partnership with GSMA and the Open Gateway Initiative. So I'm going to pass it around quickly to the folks on the panel here to introduce themselves, and we'll get going through a series of questions and discussion on the topics around the developer experience. So please, Kevin Smith from Vodafone, could you please just introduce yourself?
Thanks, Michael. Kevin Smith from Vodafone Networks. I've been working with network APIs and industry consortia and standards around network APIs for over 20 years, and I'm here representing 5G Future Forum. Hello.
Okay, Henry, can you go introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Henry Calvert. I'm head of networks at the GSMA. I'm also the industry lead for Open Gateway. So welcome, great to meet you.
Great. Noel.
So my name is Noel Wirzius. I'm doing the portfolio for network APIs in Deutsche Telekom, and we're presenting here the CAMARA open source initiative.
That's great. And yeah, thank you all again for being here. So in this discussion, I think what we're going to be able to unpack a bit is for the folks who might not be so familiar with the 5G Future Forum, the CAMARA initiative, or the Open Gateway project. Really, what are those projects doing directly, and how are they collaborating together? And so I'm going to, Noel, maybe just pass it back to you for the CAMARA initiative. I know with the open source summit that's going on right now in Bilbao, with partnership with the Linux Foundation, I know our colleagues working on the CAMARA initiative are there and promoting it. Could you maybe say a few words specifically about the formation of the CAMARA initiative and what your role within that organization is specifically?
So the CAMARA initiative is there to standardize network APIs in a northbound. So northbound is meaning every API which is going out of a telco to a developer which is not sitting in the telco. And there the really goal that these APIs are having a standard in all telcos. So, and founded is CAMARA Alliance 2 years ago, and under the roof of the Linux Foundation with support from the GSMA, and now they're in 250 companies, 750 people are working right now on 14 different API families. So it's growing and growing and growing. So, and I'm part there and leading the device status working group, and also I'm part in the backlog working group there.
Fantastic, great. Henry, could you then introduce yourself briefly, and then also the Open Gateway project with GSMA, please?
Yes, so the GSMA, people might not know, but we are the trade association for the mobile operators around the world. We have 750, almost all the mobile operators that operate on the globe. We also have another somewhat between 500 to 600 industry partners, ecosystem players like vendors, device manufacturers, infrastructure providers, maybe hyperscalers as well are also part of the GSMA. What we've been looking at the Open Gateway, our experience in the GSMA is how to monetize network capabilities, network standards, network specifications. So think of international voice, international interconnect, and international roaming. And you can get a sense that we've provided some service level agreements, templates, and commercialization. So we try and bring the industry together, convene them in one point, so we have one voice out to the developers, so you can understand what operators can offer from their network capabilities as exposed by the CAMARA initiative.
Great, thank you. Kevin, could you please introduce for the folks that are here that 5G Future Forum and how you've been involved in it since its formation?
Sure. I mean, 5G Future Forum, 5GFF, is a group of operators from around the world who got together originally because they all had MEC, or multi-access edge compute implementations, which is essentially a way of putting compute, storage, etc., close to the network and hence close to the end user. And when you have that situation, then you can deliver services with, let's say, lower latency, lower loss, and you can also guarantee things like security in that the information doesn't leave a certain domain, for example, doesn't go around the world to be fulfilled. And as part of that initiative, we've been looking at APIs, which can help people get the most out of MEC, for example, finding out where the closest MEC is to a given user, because that's the one that's going to give the best performance. And when CAMARA was formed, we immediately thought, well, let's make sure that the APIs we're looking at get shared to CAMARA, because there's no point in just having multiple standards or what have you. So we're very strong contributors and advocates of CAMARA, and look forward to working together. And also many of the operators, I believe, are members of, as Henry says, the GSMA Open Gateway Initiative. So it's all tying together nicely.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that. And I think maybe, Henry, I'll pass this one back to you in terms of that partnership dimension between these organizations. And I think we already touched upon the CAMARA initiative, 5GFF, Open Gateway. All three of our respective operator companies are members of those groups. And can you kind of give our audience a bit of a kind of that connective thread, how the GSMA specifically is helping from the business perspective, the ecosystem, complement the developer experience there?
I think CAMARA, 5GFF is bringing some pretty innovative use cases and the needs and the requirements of what they see to provide solutions into the enterprise market. Kevin mentioned MEC, how to discover a server, the quality on demand of networking and connectivity that we can actually provide to those MEC servers as well, all the way from the end user all the way through. So that's a good way of doing it. But for developers, they need a very simple way to really solve a very complex networking connectivity. CAMARA brings that into play through the APIs that they expose. Now we need a commercial framework behind that to monetize it. So there's value, there's scale, and we can actually deliver a better experience than anyone could have imagined originally. Also, when you actually think about it, there are multiple operators, multiple endpoints, the 750 operators I mentioned. In the mobile infrastructure, there's 8.5 billion connections to date. Now that takes a lot of orchestration, and that either requires basic interconnect for the API calls, or it requires federation, ways of going to market, like through a marketplace or through a reseller, commonly known as an aggregator, or operators just doing it directly and doing the interconnect. And there has to be commercial arrangements between that, so the service levels are maintained and the developers and the endpoints can be fulfilled. They can be provisioned, they can be serviced at the end of the day. So we're bringing all that together in a very nice product for the market, so it's simple and easy for developers to contract with operator network capabilities through API code.
Great. Yeah, I think obviously working on the standards for the northbound, for the edges of the network, it's always important for us to not just look at it from one network, but all the networks that a developer might want to try to get larger reach through. So I appreciate that in describing the commercial framework aspect of the Open Gateway. I think it's very, very important here. Let's maybe shift back, kind of looking at the title of our session, right? In terms of the enhancing the developer experience. Let's define that a bit more for folks and maybe talk about some examples how, say, the CAMARA initiative and 5GFF and Open Gateway are partnering with developers and enhancing the developer experience. So, Kevin, maybe I'll pass this one. Start with you, please. Can you maybe talk about how your work within 5GFF, for example, is complementing the developer's experience, or any developer programs that you're involved in with the 5GFF?
Sure. Maybe the key, alluded to is that you have to get the involvement of those people who will use the APIs, the developers who use them, to validate that the APIs are useful, but also that they're usable. And 5GFF has a MEC acceleration program, which is a program that anybody can go to the 5gff.org website. They can submit their idea and why they want to work with the different operators. And what you'll then find is a partnership with a team of 5GFF members across technical, business, legal, security, etc., who will help make a proof of concept of that idea and promote it as well. But part of that is where APIs are being used. The 5GFF members will offer up their APIs, as I mentioned, the ones going through CAMARA, and any feedback that the developer gives will go back into the standard, which has happened. The APIs being on GitHub, they're easy to iterate and push new versions of. So that works really well. And we've had some good success at the last MWC, for example, GSMA Mobile World Congress, with the first transatlantic guitar jam using operator MEC servers in Canada, USA, and the UK to relay sound with the partner SyncStage Open Sesame.
Great. And I think, yeah, just for our listeners here, the links for these developer programs, we'll add them into the summary for folks. Yeah, maybe Noel, could you then, with respect to the CAMARA initiative, speak to any ways that that group is specifically engaging with developers and what that's going to help influence with the developer experience the initiative will be able to provide, please?
Of course. So like I mentioned before, the goal of CAMARA is to define northbound APIs for developers. So the main focus and the main point should be a good developer experience, let me call it like this. And due to this, so it's an open source community, and we're having also some developers and non-telco companies in this community helping us to define the standard. And even with this, it's the main point so maybe let's phrase this different. So if an API is going to CAMARA, it should be clear that there's a consumer need and that it's so simple that the consumer understands it. So in the best way, the API, before there's a commit, is tested by a developer external from a telco. So by starting this, we had having this quality on demand API. Well, I guess it was the first API in the first repository in CAMARA. So we from Deutsche Telekom side tested this with a lot of companies like BMW and other companies to have a feeling how the API is performing and to submit the first concept, which is then also first tested by developers. Of course, there are still mistakes in, but not to call it mistakes, but not, something what is not really good for developers where they see potential. And this is why we work in CAMARA strongly together with developers to having in the end a version every developer outside can understand, and even without telco knowledge. So really moving away from telco knowledge to normal developers, as we call it like this.
Yeah, and I think something important the CAMARA initiative does well is organizing its backlog publicly on GitHub, right? And using the community to help rank the work that's being done. And I believe also the existence of the end user council for, again, engaging the developer community. So I think that's all really positive. Henry, I'm going to pass this one to you, please. We talked a bit before on the 750 operators that are part of GSMA. And I think it's good to maybe go a little bit deeper on that. We talked a minute ago, you talked about the commercial framework. So maybe and SLAs and the work, the templates and so forth. So if you apply this commercial framework in the context of this specific, relationship, these open network APIs initiatives, how can that help translate to the developers who are trying to learn to this, the investors in those projects from a business value perspective to help them gain reach? How can the services and commercial frameworks this GSMA specifically has provided help them specifically there?
Yeah, people might know some of the GSMA's event business, like Mobile World Congresses. Our largest is in Barcelona, where around about 80,000 to 100,000 attendees meet every year. But we've also got MWC Shanghai, and just around the corner now, we've got MWC Las Vegas. And so we have a great outreach model that we can actually look at. But first of all, we've got to actually start to create the content to talk about. So we've collected together some of the telco evangelists that are part of CAMARA, part of 5GFF, part of the operator industry, to be able to explain what we are doing from a GSMA perspective on Open Gateway and exposing the APIs and the use cases they can do. Secondly, we're trying to, from a GSMA's position, do two things. We're trying to provide a signpost to developers on where all the operators' developer portals or early adopter programs are, so they understand where they can start to use, test, be in a sandpit with those APIs and get good support from the operators. And that's really important, understanding how they work and how they do. Secondly, the GSMA is trying to collate where all the operators are and where they're exposing their APIs and what those APIs do under what we call the telco finder. And I think that's going to be really useful for developers, because then they'll know how many endpoints, how many subscribers they can actually reach through the APIs that they're actually using. Very important for a developer. And lastly, in our outreach programs, we're going to start developer conferences. So at Mobile World Congress Las Vegas on the 27th of September, we'll be holding our first DevCon, where we will have operators talking to developers. We invite developers to get in touch with us at the GSMA and come along and listen to what's actually happening. More importantly, we want to listen to developers. We want to understand their requirements. We understand what we're doing wrong, how we can make things smoother, not only from a technical aspect, but also from a commercial aspect.
That's perfect. And I think certainly the activities GSMA has done in the decade since its formation and helping the telco industry push in this more efficiently in the same direction is going to be very important here for us to, again, improve that developer experience. I think we're going to wrap up shortly, but I want to pass this one, Kevin, to you in terms of, experience maybe in working within the telco industry, and what we may have as learnings from the past and growing and improving from the 3G, 4G era, with the 3GPP evolution on the northbound to now what we're really seeing in this new space. What can we say is fundamentally different, and how does it also harmonize with the work we're still doing, of course, within just the pure telco 3GPP space? So how do these two harmonize and complement each other?
Yeah, so to the first part, that this is, to my knowledge, the third major push by the industry, the telco industry, to make network APIs be taken up by developers. I chaired two of them, one in 2008 called One API and one some years later called WAC Network APIs. And in both cases, we did quite a few things right. We'd had RESTful APIs, we had developer outreach. What was missing, though, were a few things. Firstly, as you say, the networks, they were not really geared up for sharing information. And that's, of course, changed with first LTE, now 5G standalone. You have service-based architectures with network functions, which do expose interfaces. And because there's been a digital transformation in most telcos, there's an API-first attitude, really right up to the senior level. And that means that the cybersecurity teams are working closely with the network and API teams to say, okay, you've got this information. And yes, if you follow these principles, you can safely and securely expose it, which again wasn't there before. The third part is CAMARA, doing everything in public on GitHub. It's a big game changer, and we're seeing more developer interaction than we used to. And finally, to Henry's point, the coverage, if we have 750 operators in GSMA, and GSMA are doing a great job at banging the drum, getting network APIs front and center, interconnection, federation, that gives us a much, much stronger position to start from. 3GPP as well, they continue their evolution. So in future, you will see the ability for the signaling plane and the user plane to interact more closely than before, which will remove some of the hurdles for acquiring some information between those two planes, which again will be a big benefit.
Fantastic. Well, I think for today, that's really all the time we have. And I want to thank everyone who's made time to join us here. for that time. And I'm going to put links on the summary for everyone to hopefully reach out with any questions. So thank you, Kevin, Henry, and Noel, and hope to hear from you soon. Have a good day.
Thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.